For the afternoon program, we have a couple of things on the agenda here. So number one, we are going to get into the franchise development world in just a moment. So we have a bunch of really great experts that are going to kind of go through the going-ons of 2024 in that particular realm. From there, we are going to be getting into what's happening on Capitol Hill, Wall Street, all of those great things that will be guided by Mr. Max Stapleton from Fisher Zucker. And then lastly, the thing that I know that a lot of you guys are probably waiting around for, it was our crowd favorite last year, is Shark Tank. So very, very excited for that. All the folks that have been working on that have been working very hard on it. So very excited for you guys to see what our participants have in store. One thing I do want to call to order here before we get started tonight. Did everybody get the email that Haley sent out about the link for Shark Tank? Did everybody get that? Did anybody not get that for some reason? For any other reason aside from not checking your email? Okay, cool. So if you guys have questions about how that works, let me know. If that's not populating for you, please let Haley know out in front. But I think that's it for me. So without further ado, I'm going to give you over to Mr. Ryan Combie, and he'll be taking the stage. All right, folks, the Fran Dev panel, folks.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having us up. I kind of fell into franchising when I was like 25 years old. I started a company and turned it into a franchise. Scott Abbott was actually the first person I ever knew in franchising. So he kind of introduced me. Scott introduced me to Brad. But I remember had been in franchising for like 2 years before I went to a franchise event. And I remember just feeling super out of place that there were lots of old people, and now I'm like one of the old people there. So anyway, it comes full circle. But cool, let's get into franchise development. We've got a really good panel here, people that have sold a lot of franchises and sell franchises from a lot of different ways. I'll add a little color here and there, but why don't we start out? Albert, do you want to start out? We'll kind of go this way. Just introduce yourselves, what brand you're with, and yeah, just introduce yourself, what brand you're with.
Sure. My name's Albert, with a company called Floor Coverings International. We're the #1 rated flooring company in North America. We're owned by a publicly traded organization called First Service. We've got about 300 franchise owners. Last year we awarded 90 new franchisees.
My name is Don Verdi. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Clean Eats. We're a lifestyle brand out of Wilmington, North Carolina. And we have about 115 locations open with another 75 in our pipeline. Last year we sold, I think, 25 licenses, and we're on pace to do the same this year.
Yeah, my name is Brigham. We've been franchising 3 years, 90 doors opened in the 3 years, and Hello Sugar is the brand. We're a Brazilian waxing and sugaring company. Let's see, like last year, we've doubled in size every year, so every year we've exponentially grown, and this year we're on track to do about 60 to 70 units.
My name's Austin Alexander. I'm the Vice President of Massage Heights, and a quick little shout out is co-founder and CEO over here, Shane Evans, just celebrated 20 years in business as of April 4th this year, which is a tremendous accomplishment, doing so with over 100 units. And for those that do not know Massage Heights, we are a body and face concept, an elevated spa-like experience without the price tag behind it, membership model, and I've been in franchising almost a decade at this point in time now.
Nice. I should have introduced myself first. My name's Ryan Combie. I have a little company called Cornerstone Franchise Partners, where we invest in new franchise concepts, and I've been in franchising a while. All right, so let's get into it. So I remember when, like I said, I kind of fell into franchising, and I started franchising because people started showing up to my store and asking me if I was going to franchise. And I was like, yeah, why not? And so as we started the franchise process and I started selling franchises, I was still running like 3 corporate locations. So I had to create different ways to sell that. And after I sold out of that company and I got more exposed to franchising and I started to go to franchise events, there were a lot of things that just struck me as really weird. Like, why are people still selling franchises this way? Or why are they doing things this way? And this was back when, like, send us your address and we'll mail you a DVD. You know, it's like a big thing. Like, if you guys give us something, I'm going to mail you a DVD like it was a copy of The Godfather, you know. But let's start with the panel. Like, when you guys first started getting into franchising and selling franchises, is there anything that struck you as different or weird, or that you didn't understand why things were done that way? And if so, did you do anything to change that or to kind of do things differently?
So I guess I'm going to go first because all the eyeballs went over to me. For me, I started in franchising in 2011, and I took a single unit of a fitness brand that I'd started from scratch and grew it to about 65 units. And we were looking to get our first franchise location, so our second unit. We would attend all these conferences, and there was this misnomer that we need to sell a franchise, sell a franchise, sell a franchise. And what we quickly realized was that that's just not the right mentality to take. Somebody who might buy a food service franchise versus a home service franchise versus a beauty care franchise, anything else, has different skill sets. And so we really needed to do a deep dive on who it is that we thought might perform well in our fitness company and make sure we were recruiting those types of people. So I think from the beginning, I thought that selling a franchise just meant selling a franchise. But come to find, of course, we all know that that's not the case.
Yeah. Don, anything you thought was weird?
Well, for a little background story, my wife and I didn't come from like a business background. I was a carpenter for 15 years and she was an x-ray tech. So when we had our little health food cafe on the beach and we decided to franchise it, you know, we had a couple guys come to us and said, you know, you should franchise this model. And we both kind of looked at each other like we'd seen a ghost and didn't really know what the hell they were talking about and that sort of thing. And when we started to sell licenses, they said, you know, you've got to get X, Y, Z, you've got to make sure you get tax returns and do all of this shit. And we were just two dumb meatheads, gym rats from the Midwest. We were like, I don't want to do it that way. Just bring them in, let's talk to them, spend 2 or 3 hours with them. We'll get to know them, and if we like them, cool. Now, we've came a long way since then, but in the beginning, that's how we did it.
Yeah. Tell, Don, share your what you do when somebody applies to buy a franchise.
Yeah, so he asked in a call that we had if we do anything different. And one of the things, you know, when we partnered with our development partner, they would give us a 3 or 4 page questionnaire that they give to potential candidates. And it worked for a little while, but we started to get people to come to our discovery days. And I know all of you guys probably do this, but how many times have you gotten one and then you approve this franchisee and within 60 to 90 days, you're like, who the hell is this person? I don't even know this person. It wasn't who came to see me. It was not who came and talked to me. And so I went to our development partner and said, I want to take that questionnaire and throw it in the garbage. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, everybody on the planet now, damn near, has a cell phone in their pocket. Take that questionnaire and I want them to answer at least a 3-minute video on camera. And that told me a couple things, right? It showed me, one, how do they present themselves on camera? Are they sitting upright? Are they engaged? Or are they just checking boxes and answering questions? You can literally see that in a video. And then 2, our brand is kind of a lifestyle brand. We live and die on social media. And so that would show me how they would interact on that phone damn near every day on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever it was. You would know how they were going to market from there. That was not a determining factor on whether we would approve them or not. There would be things that I would look for in that video that I would look for when they came to see us and I talked to them in person.
Yeah. Brigham, what about you? Anything weird?
Yeah, I'll start off. Let me just ask a question to you guys. How many of you are first-year franchising or 10 or fewer units right now? Anyone? Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys for a minute. There's 4 routes you can take. Number 1 is you can use an FSO, a franchise sales organization. Number 2 is you can use a broker network. Number 3, you can use a franchise developer who's going to take a royalty and a percentage. And number 4, you can do it yourself. And the contrarian viewpoint that I didn't understand year 1 is I don't need to be 60, 100, 500 units sold the first year. It's actually detrimental. And so what I would challenge you guys to do is to think wherever you are now at 10 or fewer units, stay there the first year. Don't worry about growing to massive levels. get it right. Go work those businesses. Make them as hella profitable as possible. Because if you want to sell franchises, after the first, it's easy to sell 5 off your corporate stores. But after those first 5 or so, those new franchisees are going to talk to the original ones. And that's the whole litmus test. And if those guys don't say, I'm making a lot of money and I'm very happy, you're dead in the water. Your franchise will never grow. So stop worrying about 20, 30, getting a sales organization, giving up royalties, all that stuff. Just get it right with like 5 and take a hockey style approach to growth.
To add to that, like winning cures all. Like that's just a fact in franchising. And so I said this to one of our partners. We have a franchisee that calls all the time. And he was like, geez, this guy can wear you out. I said, yeah, could you imagine what it'd be like if he wasn't making a ton of money? And so it's like if you want to create a headache for yourself, go sell a bunch of franchises to people that don't make money. Because they think you're useless even when you are making money half the time, right? If they're not making money, it's going to be the most stressful experience. It's going to impede the energy and the growth of the entire organization. So yeah, focus on fewer numbers. Making more money is way better than a bunch of numbers and trying to figure out how to get them going.
My first year, I didn't do any sales. I just talked to my network. And I just told stories about the success of my original franchisees. And that's the first year, that's all I needed to do.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So I guess the strangest thing when I first got into franchise sales was we were still sending the FDD snail mail. Quickly changed that into a DocuSign or through a CRM. But aside from that, similar to what Albert was saying, is coming into the space, not really understanding who was our ideal franchisee in that persona space. And again, I was surrounded by folks that didn't know that either. And I was the new kid on the block side of things. First conversation I had, I must have gotten really lucky and ended up being a net worth of about $100 million and about 15 licenses straight out of the gate, which was pretty neat. But the moral of that story is that's not everyone you talk to. Yeah, that's probably the early ons.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that struck me as weird, that I still think is weird, and a lot of people in this room would want to argue about it, but I've never understood this like structured path that we're adamant somebody go through to buy a franchise. Like we have steps 1 through 12, and you've got to check all of these boxes in order to move on. Because for me, like if I'm going to sell a franchise to somebody that's already invested in 10 different brands, that process is going to be significantly different than if I'm going to sell a franchise to a high school history teacher that's rolling over their 401k. And so I thought that was weird when I first got into it. There were brands that would be completely unflexible in how they would take people through the sales process. It was like, man, there's some people that are, like to me, if I got on a phone call with somebody and in the first 5 minutes they were asking about my FDD or item 19 or whatever, I was like, this person's pretty sophisticated, and I'm going to send it over. Like I used to send people the FDD through a text chat, like the chat box on a website. Because it's like, if you were smart enough to ask for it, then you're smart enough to know what to look for, and there you go. So that's kind of an approach I've always taken, is just, if somebody doesn't want any hurdles, then I'm going to remove all the hurdles from it. So let's talk about this a little bit with selling. How do you guys budget to sell a franchise? Because I mean, now you've got brokers, you've got FSOs, you've got people that still do it organically. The cost to sell a franchise can vary significantly. So one, how do you guys track kind of like the cost of acquisition? And then how do you budget for your year on, like if we want to sell this many franchises, we're going to spend this much? Or is it just kind of like, we'll spend whatever it takes to sell? So how do you guys handle that? Albert, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so again, we're owned by a publicly traded company, so I'm told at the middle of the, actually right around this time of year for next year, what the expectations are next year in terms of new units and how much profit my department needs to generate. And so with that, I can play with everything in the middle. So for me, I know we get our leads almost exclusively through broker networks, so I know what my cost per deal is on that side of things, but we actively market towards broker networks, which has a cost associated with it. Yeah, there's a cost to be part of the broker networks. We've got salaries for the 7 developers that are on our team. So Ultimately, the budget's given to me, the top line and bottom line, and then I have to figure out the rest. But we do a damn good job at figuring out the rest.
My answer is very simple. We don't.
Okay.
We're in the brick and mortar restaurant space, so right now, SBA rates are killing everyone, and so we're just being very selective on, one, who we will approve, but we're not spending a lot of money on lead gen just because we don't want to blow it away. There's a lot of people out there in that space that just can't afford to do it anyway, so we're just taking a very simplistic approach to it, really.
Yeah, I'm gonna give like a simple math formula on this. Take whatever your budget was, take whatever your revenue was last year, assume you're gonna open about the same number of doors, and then start with that as your marketing budget. And then from there, if you sell more doors, maybe take 50% of that and put it into the allocation towards marketing.
So can you use an example on that?
Yeah.
Just so people, so let's say you had $1 million in revenue last year.
Well, no, I'm saying like, let's say my friend, so in my company, I allocate buckets for the different revenue streams that we have, and I want each of those independent buckets to have profitability and sustainability.
Gotcha.
So on the franchise sales side, whatever we make in franchise sales, that's our budget. So last year, let's say we sold 100 units, let's just say we did $1 million in revenue out of the franchise sales fees, then that would be my budget this year. And then if we can do better, because we're most likely going to do at least $1 million again, right? So if we do better than that, I'll take 50% of that budget and allocate it again to new sales.
Nice.
Yeah, and really for us, the biggest thing is, right, being a 20-year history behind the organization is we have a lot of data to support what we're looking at year over year. I like to look at us very much as a re-emerging brand. Being 20 years old at this point in time, right, is you do have that growth spurt, and then you go through that full, flywheel of franchising and really making sure that the franchisee validation is strong, they're all making money, and now we're back in a position to grow. But at the same time, we're not pausing sales side of things. We're still understanding what is the cost to acquire leads, what is our ultimate closing ratio, what is the cost to be within the networks that we're prioritizing side of things. So it's really just a kind of a reverse, kind of backing yourself out of the top line number side of things.
I always tell people there's a simple approach for an emerging brand or even an established brand is to decide, I'm willing to spend X to sell one franchise, right? So whether that's 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, whatever it is, I'm willing to spend that. A lot of times I think people get caught on the macro where they're like, well, if I spend $100,000, I need to generate this many leads, and that's going to have to turn into this many calls and blah, 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 blah. Whereas I take the approach of like, I'm willing to spend $10,000 to sell a franchise. So if I have an idea that's going to cost me $10,000, I'm literally just trying to find one person to buy a franchise. I'm not trying to find 100 leads. I'm not trying, this is my idea. It's going to cost me $10,000, and I'm going to sign one agreement from it. So it kind of makes it easy, especially if you don't have like a huge budget. If it's just like, look, I'm going to go drop 10 grand in the next 2 months or 5 grand in the next 2 months, and I'm going to find the one right person to sell the franchise. It's an easy approach if you're starting out. I have some other questions, but I want to make sure that we get to other people's questions. So I want to open it up early for questions. If not, then we can take over. But hopefully there's questions in the room for these guys that we can talk about. So does anybody have a question? Red.
What's an FSO? What's a broker group? And are they mutually exclusive?
I can take that one. I can take that one.
Brigham brought it up, so we'll let him handle it.
Yeah, thanks. So FSOs are going to be a franchise sales organization. Typically, they're going to take about 50% of your franchise fee, plus a royalty, plus a equity piece is like the highest level pricing. At the lowest level pricing, they're just going to take a piece of the royalty, a piece of the franchise fee. But what they're going to do for you is they're going to take the sales process from nothing, no one knows anything about it, all the way through to the time that you get to discovery day. So you're worried about discovery day. Now, the benefit of an FSO over just a broker network is the FSO is going to know all of the main contacts in all of the broker networks, and they're going to be pitching your idea, sort of like speed dating, to all of these broker networks. They're going to know which ones they're going to use for you. They're going to accelerate your growth at a massive rate. They're going to take a higher percentage of the actual deal by doing so. The broker network is going to be local people, think like real estate agents, who have people that come to them and say, look, I'm looking for a business, similar like I'm looking for a home. And then they're going to get in front of them and they're going to say, well, are you looking for passive or active? Are you looking for anything in a special expertise? Do you want to be in retail or restaurant? And then they're going to present to them ideas of potential businesses to buy. And typically the brokers are incentivized by their paycheck, so they're going to present the ideas that are most related to their commission.
Can I add that everything you said was right and fair, but much more simply put, broker networks are a lead source. You get leads from a broker network, just like you get leads from a pay-per-click campaign, and an FSO would be outsourced franchise development department.
Yeah.
Is that fair too?
They take the lead all the way through.
Good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how many units do you have right now?
Lots of them.
Is
Lots
this your
and lots
first-
and lots.
Is this your first time being in a room with Red?
Red. Oh my gosh, yeah, red. You're not wearing your suit today. Like, where's the red? Oh my gosh. Yeah. You could work with both.
I'll tag on to that. So do you find that brokers are more apt to use the brands that have an FSO or a good sales team, or do you find doing fake brands with,
It's a good question.
yeah,
So she said, do you find that brokers would rather work with a brand that has an FSO versus somebody that doesn't have an FSO? Did you want to answer the question, or do you have another question? Okay, but so you're in the queue.
I can answer.
Really good question, though.
I could answer. I think it depends how good your development team is.
And Albert's a good person to answer this because Floor Coverings International a couple years ago, look, that's a very established brand with big budgets and resources to do franchise development however you guys want. And they kind of made the commitment, like, we're going to go all in on broker networks.
Now, we have an internal team, and I think we do a really good job, maybe as good as some FSOs, but we've got a really good internal team. But if you have no experience and no relationships in the broker world, I would imagine that an FSO would get you some relationships faster.
This is conjecture on my part, but I would say most brokers would probably rather send a lead to an FSO than an emerging brand. Because that lead to the broker is money, right? And so they would want to, again, this is me talking here. I don't have the data to back this up. But they just want to make sure they're going to get paid when they pass that lead along. And so if it's like a one-person show doing everything, they may have some apprehension about sending a lead that way. Whereas an FSO, those are typically well-oiled machines. Like, they're there to get paid on that lead too. They're going to bring them in. They're going to take them through the cycle. Like, Floor Coverings International is not going to deal with that issue because, again, they're a super established brand. Like, most of these are very established brands, but I think in a lot of cases, emerging brands are going to struggle to gain traction in the broker networks.
And I think I would add to that, and Red, hopefully I don't say anything wrong here, but in the consultant networks, it's a lot about relationships. And, the consultants are spending a lot of time and energy and resources into gathering these leads, right? And they're going to be referring them to the folks that they trust in guiding their candidate through the process. Ultimately, seeking a commission at the end of the day is very important to them. That's how they put food on the table for their families. But at the end of the day, I truly think it's around the relationships, the trust they have with the Fran Dev side of things, and getting to that end goal. Because in the consultant space, referrals are, that's free lead sources for them. They want their clients happy long term.
I have a different approach to this whole thing. I kind of have, and I don't want to offend anybody in the room.
Nobody's going to
Do it.
If they are, they're going to be too afraid to tell you, so you're cool, bro.
I have a love-hate relationship with both. And I'll explain that. My wife and I went through a lot of struggles when our brand was really young. And I wish I could go back in time, and I wish somebody would have come across and hit us in the head with a frying pan and said, do it on your own as long as you humanly possibly can do it. And that's what I would say to do. Until you get to where you're established enough to where those people can actually create a lot of value for you and not give up half of your company in the process of doing
Sure.
it.
Wait, she had first position.
so I
And I'll speak to, I mean, we'll talk that, but I've sold over 1,000 franchises in my career, and I bet you 5 of them have been through brokers. I've never used brokers. But let's go through your guys' thoughts. Because Brigham, you don't use brokers, or you?
At this current time, we don't use brokers
Yeah.
or FSOs. We do it all internal. Oh, yeah, I'll go first, I guess. Okay, so I'll give you 2 actionable things that you can do today that like maybe are contrarian that aren't being done as much. One is podcasts. I do a lot of podcasts. I set up a setup in my office. I got a nice camera. I got a nice backdrop, and I use Podmatch. Podmatch is like I think Tinder for podcasts. Really is what it is. And they just match me with podcast people. They give me like 3 to 5 matches a day. I built a profile. I built like a little video of like who I am. We send it off automatically to people, and if they like me, they put me on their podcast. And most of it is trash. Like most of the time, I'm just like, oh hell, I got to go through an hour of this. I'm like checking the time. So I need to be more scrupulous with and discerning about who I go on with. But sometimes you get that golden ticket, and that leads you to some amazing podcasts. And it's been a really good like starting point. And now that I've developed a podcast history, I'm starting to get invited to, and I always ask them like, who do you know that has a podcast? And I get invited to other podcasts, and it's been very helpful for the brand. I've sold maybe 10 to 15% of my locations through a podcast. And
Brilliant.
I think within the next year or so, it's gonna be 25%.
Love it. It's brilliant. It's awesome.
One of the things that we've done, again, is a very simplistic approach. We hired somebody outside of franchising that knew nothing about franchising, but the kid could sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, he was a great kid, and he wound up selling, I think, 6 units for us that year, which at the time wasn't that much, but it was still 6 units we didn't have. So it was a different approach, and he did his homework, and we were able to teach him, the do's and don'ts of what to say and what not to say, and he took it and ran with it, and it worked very well.
So for me, when I had the fitness brand that I'd started from scratch, it was ground and pound, baby. It was, we would throw an event anywhere we could set a table up, and we would get names, and we put people through our process. So, if you are a brick and mortar type of concept, and you could throw many little learning events in any of those locations that you have, get your client lists and start getting people to show up. If it's 5 people that show up, that's great. It's better than 0.
And that is, it's interesting, because brick and mortar is a different game, right, than if you're a service, because you have that like sign up. Where you have people that come in. You can put a sign up that says we're now franchising. I would say this. I don't think there's only one thing that I think is like black and white in franchise development, and that is you have a moral obligation to make sure the person you're selling a franchise to makes money. I think that gets lost in a lot of stuff. But like, if like we just sold a franchise to a guy that had retired as working for the electrical company, was rolling their 401k over. If you're going to go to somebody that worked 35 years and is rolling their 401k over to invest in your franchise concept, you better be pretty damn sure you're protecting that investment, right? Or you might go to hell. I'm just saying, like there's a big moral obligation there. And so now whether you find that person with a broker or you sell it through an FSO or other things, I think that varies from brand to brand and concept to concept. But you for sure, like I would say, the only black and white is make sure that you want to be as certain as you can that person's going to be successful.
So this is something that I think has been happening for a lot of brands, no matter the industry. Sorry, I didn't speak up. The idea of how you guys are mapping out territories for multi-unit actual deals that you guys are doing changes depending on the industry, whether it's home service or it's retail or whatever it may be. My question is how you guys are actually cracking down on that in order to ensure that your ratio of actually sold and not open and open is being held in check. Because we all know nowadays that what's really important is actually getting them open. We talk about that all the time, but to protect your franchisees and your system, the value of your system ultimately is predicated on the fact that you all need to have that in check. Because you don't want to sell somebody 10 locations and only know that they are you guys at corporate can find opening 2. So what are you guys doing within your brands to protect the value?
To make sure that you're opening the franchises that you sell. Because that burn, I'll add that too, that burn between selling the franchise and having them make pay enough royalties to cover their costs, it can be significant. But yeah, so talk a little bit about how you guys ensure that when you sell a franchise that they're not only are they going to get open, but they're going to get to the point where they pay for themselves. Austin.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the biggest things, and this is what I always send home, is transparency from the start, right? Is what are the expectations along the way? What is that schedule? What is the overall financial profile of these potential investors? And making sure that that match is correct. Because, I tell folks all the time, yeah, I'd love to sit here and sell you 50 licenses, but what good does that do? It's probably just going to turn into a tarnished reputation on our brand and so forth. So it's just really setting expectations from the beginning, having very open dialogue, transparency across the whole process, and bringing other folks amongst your support lanes into the picture too, because I might have a different opinion on one instance than, for instance, Shane might have on some candidates and so forth. So I think transparency is the biggest thing for us, and making sure that we're doing it, and I know Aaron's probably in here, but is responsibly. It's not worth burning down, potentially our brand and as well as the industry.
We do it a lot different than a lot of people do, and we started doing this in 2019 when we partnered with our development partner. And we sell licenses by MSAs, so we actually don't award a territory until they sign a lease. So like if an MSA has 10 licenses, and you have 2 owners in there, we have an LOI process that we make them follow, right? It's kind of first come, first serve, and then they have seniority, and there's a little bit more to it than that. But there's pros and cons to doing it that way. Yes, they open units. We make sure that happens, and it works. Where it gets tricky is in markets like this, like Chicago and Atlanta,
Right.
Where you've got multiple people in one market like that. The one thing that I've been a stickler on is I don't let those territory radiuses that we use, I don't let them intersect, which kind of gives them a little bit more protection, and it makes them feel a little bit better that I'm not going to throw somebody right in their backyard. But it's worked, but our system does have some kinks in big markets like that I'm still trying to figure out.
So for us, we're not brick and mortar based, we're home services based. And for starters, you have to understand what your territories need to be in terms of how they're defined, so that you know that your operators have the ability to build the business they need to build. But then don't oversell. We will only sell 2 at a time. 1 unit's reserved for the franchise owner that's proven themselves that they operated 2, so that they can add on. And then if they want 3, 4, or 5, we'll make opportunities for people that have that appetite down the road. But they've got to start with what they can stomach from the start, and we won't sell more than 2.
These are all good points. I'm going to give a couple of principles here on the territories that I've learned over the last 3 years. This is something that I've researched a lot, so I'll give you a couple of principles. Number 1 is whatever your market size is today for a territory, in a grown, mature brand, it will probably be about half of that. Okay, so if you think there's a 10-pack in Chicago, it's probably a 20-pack, but it's not a 20-pack today, it's a 20-pack in a couple of years. And so to mitigate the risk of, let's say I have a territory, let's say we're in Chicago, I'm here, Albert's 20 minutes away, and Don lives in between. Don could go to Albert's territory.
You better not. Just don't.
Let's say Don's a client, and Albert has a salon, and I have a salon, right? Don could go to either one. And if I put a salon in between, I'm going to take the client from one of these salons. They're going to lose revenue, and they're going to be pissed. But if Albert's mature, bursting at the seams, he's not going to care as much. So we do it's really interesting, we do a zone and an exclusive territory. And the zone is larger and has a 3-year expiration, giving promises to the franchisee, I'm not going to open anything in this area where Don lives for a while until my brand gets to be larger. So that's principle 1, is that territory sizes change with maturity. Principle number 2 is make a bet. Make a bet of how many units you can put into a market. And don't saturate all at once. The average franchise is going to only open 50% of the territories sold. That's average, 50%. So don't oversell. So what we've done with Chicago, I've got 3 owners that we just put into Chicago this year. All of them have a $2 million plus liquid capital worth. They're gonna be huge owners here. And I said, you know what? Chicago's a 40-pack over 5 years. And I want to develop this over 5 years. So I took the whole area and I said, look, I'm not going to give you 10 territories each. I'm going to give you 5 territories. And I'm going to sell you 5 ahead of time. And I'm not going to bring another franchise owner in
Right.
unless you guys stop building. So all these other gray areas, I'm not promising it to you because I'm placing a bet on them just like they're placing a bet on me. I'm not going to promise it to you, but in 3 years, if you stop developing, I'm going to bring another person in. So you place a bet on the number of franchise owners will be in a specific market. You place a bet on how many can be sustained in that market. And like Al said, don't oversell a specific number of territories. Sell fewer and let them fight it out through performance to see who gets to open the rest.
We do that a lot where we just call it take it out of inventory, right? So we're in Cook County. There's 20 units available here. I'll sell you 10, and I'll agree to take the other 10 out of inventory for a period of 36 months, right? The only thing worse than a franchisee that doesn't make money is 2 franchisees that don't make money, right? Especially if they're in the same market, because then they like get together and plan how they are going to destroy the brand. And so, but yeah, we'll do that a lot where we'll take territories out of inventory to allow someone to fully develop the market.
Can I just add something real quick just to keep it simple? Like ultimately it begins and ends with what your guiding light is as a franchise development team or internally or however you look at your franchise development arm or your franchise brand. If the guiding light is put people into business that can be successful for the long term and make your logo well known in the consumer space, like that's your guiding light, then you'll do things responsibly in the right way. If your guiding light is to move as many units as you possibly can, then, well, that's not responsible. So, I mean, and you'll figure out the way to do it the other way, but figure out kind of what your goal is first and what your guiding light is, and everybody will do things a little bit different.
Yeah, European Wax right now is at 1,050 doors. They're our largest competitor. They've promised their stock market that they're going to open 3,000 doors in the United States, and that's physically not possible.
It's not possible. Like, there's literally not the number of leases available.
Not in larger cities,
Yeah.
right? And so what's going to happen is they're going to super saturate a market. All of their profits of their individual units are going to go down, and people are going to start selling franchises, and it'll implode the system because they haven't strategically thought how to actually build a sustainable business. And I think that's a good example for everyone. We need to think about how many territories. We need to be thoughtful about it. We need to leave margin on the table for our franchisees to make money.
And the franchise graveyard is littered with brands that oversold areas to people that just physically could not open locations. Like not that they didn't want to, not that they didn't have the money, but there are only so many strip malls in Dallas-Fort Worth, right? Like that are going to qualify. And so if you have 27 cookie brands that are trying to get into a strip mall, like it's just a fact. You're not going to be able to open five units in 2 years.
I just continue to circle back to the KISS method. I'm a firm believer in it. Keep it simple, stupid. He mentioned something earlier, and I meant to say it, and we do the same thing, is we won't sell any more than 3 units at a time, period. Doesn't matter who it is. I don't care what kind of car they drive or how much money they pull up to our office with. They're only getting 3, and if they don't want that, then tough.
Here's what I would say that I've learned, and there's people in this room that are a lot better qualified to talk about this than me, but grab one of the private equity people and ask them if they'd rather buy a franchise system that has $5 million in EBITDA with 50 owners or $5 million of EBITDA with 200 owners. Right? Like, I mean, would you rather operate a system making $5 million with 50 people or $5 million with 200? And so give your owners a chance to succeed and grow, because you want the guy that owns 10 territories. They're cheaper to manage. They're less of a risk. It's better all around for the brand, typically. It's hard to do. I know it's hard to do, especially this day and age. But yeah, a little bit of discipline will go a long ways for the brand.
How many times do you say no,
How often do you say no?
and why?
In our brand specifically, just because of what it is and how it operates, we have 5 revenue streams under one roof. So we say no more than we say yes. And we kind of had to learn that the hard way by approving people that we found out we shouldn't have. So we are definitely not afraid to say no now.
I have a little bit of a different spin on it. I think that if you're saying no a lot towards the end of your process stinks.
That's
So I don't
Really
know
good.
if you should be saying no a lot. I think you should have a really good process that weeds people out as they go through the process.
to that. I was going to say this earlier. You really got to know who you want to sell a franchise to. Like, if I was going to say the biggest problem in franchise development that I see is, and why I think some of these methods have grown in popularity so much, is because there's brands that genuinely have no idea who they're trying to sell a franchise to. So you got to know who you want to sell a franchise to. And I've had conversations with people that, like, 2 minutes in, I'd be like, you know what? I can tell you're not a right fit for this. Can I give you some other brands you could look at? And people get more mad at you if you tell them, like, refuse to sell them a franchise than if you sell them a franchise. That sucks. It's kind of crazy. Like, the only time I've been threatened to be sued is by a guy. I'm like, I'm not selling you a franchise no matter what you do. But yeah, it's know who you want to sell to. And I think that's a great point. If you're saying no at Discovery Day a lot, then your process sucks, because somebody shouldn't have got. That's like getting to the altar and having them say no and run away. Like,
Multiple times.
Something went wrong in that process if you made it all the way there.
I think a good franchise owner is between I'm a self-made entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and I want to be an office person that just knows what, like, follow directions, right? So somewhere in between. And so when you're looking at people, look to see if they can solve problems. And if they can ask the questions that lead to problem solving, they're typically a good fit. And look what their track record is. I just had a girl that we brought on. She was a therapist. And really in our industry, like not a massage therapist, but like a psychologist.
Therapist.
And we're working with like 23-year-old females as estheticians. So I'm like, this girl's like perfect, right? She ran her own business. She has her own therapy clinic. Never managed people. And when it came down to it, she's been a failure. I was a big mistake on my part. And I think it was just like, she's just like, what do I do here? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do you do here? You're an entrepreneur. Like, figure it out. You know, like, it's not that complicated. But for her, it was extremely complicated because I was looking for the wrong skills. I wasn't looking for a problem solver.
We solved a lot of those problems with that video that I was talking about earlier. You know, you mentioned the process. That was one big improvement for us that worked, and it worked well.
And that's something I would add is I wish I said no more frequently earlier on in my career, but again, you're sitting there like, I want to make a deal. We all know deals typically solve most problems, which tend to sometimes be more problems down the road. But to Albert's point exactly is if you're saying no after Discovery Day or Meet the Team Day, whatever you want to call it, you need to kind of look in the mirror as to what your process is leading up to that point, making sure that, again, back to transparency and having that dialogue along the way, and they'll wean themselves out. You know, anyone that comes to Meet the Team Day or Discovery Day, they should be already sold at that point in time. You should already have that mutual agreement, and it's just doing business by handshake. So I would point back to your process for sure.
Again, I'll go back to know who you want to sell with too. You're gonna have, like, I've got a lot of experiences where I'm like, this person's gonna crush it, and 90 days in, you're like, how did I miss the fact that this person's a complete idiot? And then I've had other people where I'm like, I don't know, this is more of a gamble, and they crush it. I did this like big, because I have ADHD and OCD, you know, you guys all know that thing. But I dived in once with the NBA draft and like comparing that to franchise development of like how many first round picks. So the average NBA team spends $6 million on a scouting budget for basically their one first round pick. And it's only like 15% of first round picks will be in the league in 5 years. It's like 5% will be an all-star, right? And so it's kind of crazy to think about, like, because we all want to find the all-star. None of us have $6 million to spend on a pick. And so you've really, really got to dial in, especially if you're an emerging brand. Like, if you're an established brand, there's margin for error because operationally you can sustain those hits. But like an emerging brand, you just really got to know who you want to sell to and where they're going to be to mitigate that risk. But you can't control, like, people are going to get divorced, right? People are going to get addicted to pain pills. People are going to get, like, all kinds of crazy shit happens in people's lives that will make them not do well. So at the end of the day, at least hopefully have a product that you can resell or try to mitigate a lot of the other risks.
If it's your first couple of sales, pick people you want to go to dinner with. Pick people you want to hang out with. Your business partners should be your friends.
Yeah, because you're going to hang out with them a lot.
Our first 6 owners were customers. And I can go down the list right now in my head. Our top 10 to 12 owners, they only bought one, and they come from a blue-collar background. That doesn't make them good or bad or otherwise. It just means that they have a different work ethic. And going back to what we were talking about earlier when I said that we only sell 3 units, the reason that we do that now is we found out the hard way that just us, I can't speak for every brand in here, but we had issues with a couple times people coming in with extreme high net worths that wanted these big territories. They wanted these big development agreements. They didn't want to do things our way. They didn't want to follow the system. They wanted to question every move we made around every corner. They were just kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. So we just said, I'm not dealing with it anymore. Our system, maybe our system's not mature enough to do that right now.
And Austin brought this up earlier, like transparency. I work primarily with emerging brands. I tell people all the time, like, hey, this ain't McDonald's. Like if you think we're going to drop a 500-page operations manual on you and tell you, like, that's just not who we are right now. We're looking for people that we can collaborate with that are hustlers. And sometimes, like, I bet you a lot of people will say, especially an emerging brand, the higher net worth the individual, the bigger pain they're going to be. It's tough, especially if you're selling to, like, their kid. Like, that's a recipe for disaster because, they'd rather be in Paris than operating their business.
But I think speaking directly to kind of what you said there, right, is with the emerging side of things is that prospect or prospective franchisee is wanting to have that impact on the direction of where the brand goes, right?
Right. They're looking for that.
Correct. Whereas being with more of a mature brand side of things, right, it's a proven business model. It's really, obviously we want your collaboration. That's what franchising is about. But it's dive into this process that's been proven to be successful, or you're just going to spend more time and resources combating it and end up on the other side of the table. So it's like 2 different types of investors' mindsets.
I tell this, if anybody's been in a franchise room with me, I say this over and over, but the first piece of advice I ever got when I got into franchise, to this day is the best piece of advice. And the person said, if you're going to get into franchise, you need to know 2 things. 1, any success a franchisee has will be because of them. And 2, any failures they have will be because of you. So if you're willing to accept that, you're going to be okay. But that, I have found that to be true over and over and over. If a franchisee is making money, it's because of their effort. It's because of all the things they're doing. And look, a lot of times they'll back up and they'll give you credit. But if a franchisee fails, it's not very likely they're going to be like, to be honest, I haven't put as much effort into this business as I thought, right? They're just going to be like, I hate you guys, you're idiots, this whole thing. And so it's like, but you go into it with that mentality and that transparency, and it sets you up to be in a better position. That's it. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.